This is a cave of immortals hidden in the mountains. 1 second inside is equivalent to 1 year in the outside world. An invisible barrier changes the flow of time. When a mortal looks into the cave from the outside, everything is static. The deeper you go into the cave, the slower time flows. In just a few hours, the young man who stumbled into the cave went from modern times to the end of the world. 3 days ago, a college professor came across this unassuming cave. He leaned in cautiously. He found a man standing inside. No matter how much he shouted, he didn't respond. He was dressed like an actor in a costume movie. The professor did not act rashly but went back to his students to explain his itinerary. Then he took his equipment and rushed back to the cave. When he came back, the man was still standing there. The professor picked up his flashlight and went inside. Suddenly, the air in front of him became sticky, as if there was an invisible wall. With a little effort, the professor passed through the barrier, and the man at the far end continued to move. At that moment, the professor turned around and looked into the hole. He realized that there was a flickering light outside. Then a horrible roar came from the depths of the cave. The professor didn't dare to make a move, so he ran back the way he came. But when he got out of the cave, he realized that it was already late at night, but he had only been in there for a few minutes. The professor realized something was wrong. He ran back to where he parked his car, but the place was full of weeds, and his car was rusted and ruined. It looked like it had been parked here for decades. Seeing his student's car parked next to him, the professor rushed back to the cave. 2 days after the professor's departure, when the students saw that he hadn't returned, they rushed to rescue him with their equipment. Not far from the cave, they found an abandoned van. According to the photo on it, they guessed that the professor came here to look for his missing family. They disappeared suddenly and strangely when the professor was a child. For safety reasons, George was left outside the cave. The others followed the ropes left by the professor and proceeded inside. There was more space than expected. As they descended, they encountered an air barrier, but they didn't realize it would affect the flow of time. The men descend to the bottom of the cave one by one and begin to move on. Just then another horrible sound came from the depths of the cave. The 4 of them were so frightened that they ran back, but just as they were about to make their way back, the rope suddenly snapped from the top. They thought George had cut the rope. They started calling for help on the walkie-talkie, but George didn't answer. They had no choice but to keep searching boldly, in the hope of finding another way out. Fortunately, a vertical opening soon appeared in front of them. Nami climbed up ahead of them, but she realized that there was also a rope hanging from the hole. Shortly after, she suddenly climbed down from the top with a cry. It turned out that Nami had found George's body behind the rock. At first, they thought that he had also been cut from the rope, but after seeing the footage from the camera, they felt a chill down their spine. It turned out that George had been waiting outside after the 4 of them entered the cave, but he didn't see them come up until he had eaten all the food. While looking around, he found a rope left by the professor, so he climbed down, but as soon as he reached the mouth of the cave, the rope snapped. The 4 of them had only been gone a short time, and George had eaten all the food. This is obviously not normal, so Nami climbed out of the cave along the rocks. She wanted to go outside to look for help, but when she came out, she was shocked by the scene in front of her. 4 young men wandered into an immortal's cave. Only 3 hours had passed. The forest outside has turned into a desert, and there's a huge triangular spaceship overhead. A sandstorm thousands of meters high is sweeping towards this place. Nami didn't dare to stay up there and returned to the cave. After hearing her description, at first the others couldn't believe it, but after watching the video, they all fell silent. Sean then reviewed George's video again and again. He suddenly realized something. After George entered the cave, there was a flickering light outside. That's caused by the Earth's rotation around the sun. That means that 1 second they were in the cave. A year had passed outside. Nami puts the rope on her back and prepares to climb out and rescue the men. But when she reached the entrance of the cave, a ladder suddenly came down from above. They thought someone was coming to save them. But just as Nami grabbed the ladder, a man in high-tech equipment climbed down from the ladder. The mysterious man took one look at them and didn't intend to do anything. Just as he was about to retrieve the ladder, a wildling suddenly came up from the distance. He attacked the mystic. The man didn't seem to panic. He threw the wildling to the ground. And then used his collar to control him with ease. While the other man was collecting the ladder, the men ran towards the cave, and the mystery man followed. Not too far behind, soon they saw a woman on the ground. Nami had seen her in a photo before. She was the professor's mom, but now she doesn't even look 30 years old. Then Sean suddenly told them to keep their voices down. It turns out that some savages are working on something in the distance. 3 seconds later, they finally realized. These savages were eating meat. Soon the savages noticed them too. Sean told the others to go first, then he stayed behind to hold them off. But 1 against 3 is a bit rash. Sean eventually fell. By the time Nami came back to save him, Sean was already dead on the ground. At that moment, the mysterious man came in from outside. He just took one look at Nami and went straight to the pool on the far side. Then he took some samples for testing. After doing so, the mysterious man suddenly grabbed Sean. He tried to drag him into the pool. Nami thought he was up to something. She kept interfering with him, but as Sean's body entered the pool, he miraculously came back to life. Then another wildling came by. The mystery man accidentally removed his mask. From the outside, he looked very much like a human. With Nami's help, the savage was quickly subdued, but the mysterious man could not adapt to the air in the cave. He was about to die. Before he died, he played a video. Then everyone realized what had happened. It turns out that thousands of years have passed in the outside world. Then Sean noticed the backpack on the ground. The professor should be nearby. He followed the cave and found the professor. A barrier appears in front of the man. Once he passes through it, time slows down 30 million times. From the outside, everything inside looks static, and the professor is faced with a difficult choice. His sister is being hunted by savages. Sean was stopped in his tracks when he tried to go in to save her. Saving his sister could take seconds, but once you get through the barrier, by the time he gets back, the people outside may have starved to death. The professor took a look inside the barrier. He decided to give up on saving his sister. Then Sean carried the professor back to fix his wounds. The savages are still out there, watching. The group grabbed the mystic's ladder and prepared to leave through the cave. But when Nami climbed up the ladder, she realized that the exit was filled with water. Just when she didn't know what to do, a pair of strange hands suddenly reached out from the water and dragged her in. Nami struggled desperately in the water, but when she was given an oxygen mask, she realized that the other party was not malicious. Time seemed to have stopped in the cave. 3 tentacles reached out from the water and hung Sean and his companion in the air. Then Nami poked her head out of the water and pulled them all in. The rest of the tentacles went into the cave to rescue George and the professor's daughter. Soon the dead ones were revived by the healing waters of the spring. Looking out through the glass, they realized they were over the earth. Shortly afterward, Sean and his companions walked in and told them what had happened. During the time they've been in the cave, the Earth has been in a state of decline. The human race could no longer survive here. So a 15-kilometer spaceship was built to send the survivors to live on Mars. The triangular shape of the ship they're in is the time portal used to launch the ship. The Mysterons returned to Earth to collect samples of the Fountain of Youth to bring back to Mars. Next they will take the ship to Mars to start a new life.